House Bill 2101, and then we'll consider House Bill 2015 after the hearing. See how long the hearing goes, but if it looks like it's going to go a little long, I might put a little time limit on part of the hearing. But hopefully not. So we'll go ahead and get started with the hearing. We have House Bill 2101 prohibiting municipalities from adopting and implementing a guaranteed income program. First up, ask the Office of Revisers for a quick description of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Jenna Moy, Reviser Statutes Office. House Bill 2101 would adopt a new section of law that prohibits a city or county from adopting an ordinance or resolution that establishes or provides for the operation of a guaranteed income program. An ordinance or resolution that's currently in effect prior to the effective date of this bill would become null and void, and the subsection C defines a guaranteed income program as a program that provides individuals with a regular periodic cash payment to be used for any purpose without requiring the individuals to be employed, seek employment, or attend employment-related training to receive those funds. The bill would go into effect on publication of the statute book, which is July 1st. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, committee. Any questions for the reviser? Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could you give us an example of what one of those programs would have been?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that might be a better question for one of the proponents or opponents, because I'm not aware that there's a whole lot in Kansas right now.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is there a definition in that bill or a reference in that bill to explain definition of city and size or anything like that? Is there any definition of what a...
There's not a definition, but they're fairly commonly used terms, city or county, so it would just be the city or county government. Yeah, but there's no limitation as to size. So if you're incorporated as a city.
That was my question.
Okay.
So there's not a definition that they need to be an incorporated city. They could be an unincorporated city of 3 people, and it would still count.
It's not defined, so it's a little bit unclear, but it says city, so we would just have to see what a court says.
Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there a city or county that has adopted an ordinance or resolution that establishes or provides the operation of a guaranteed income program in the state of Kansas?
I was going to say, I'm not aware of any in Kansas at the moment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Then since I've been in the legislature, there's been a few bills with regards to banning certain practices or certain restrictions put on by cities. Do you recall a few of those that are currently in statute?
I might have to look into some of those for you, which ones have actually gone through. I remember the bill about banning single-use plastic bags being banned, but I don't think that went into law. So I'll have to look and get back to you.
There might be one on fossil fuels or something similar to that we passed a few years ago.
Yeah, I'll look into that and get back to you.
It might be helpful just as a reference to what's been done in the past, and then also.
Okay.
Any other questions, committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. We will move on then to the proponents. We'll open up the hearing on House Bill 2101. Start with the proponents. Our first proponent is Liesl Crocker, Visiting Fellow, Opportunity Solutions Project. And I believe this proponent is joining us via WebEx. Liesl, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Ready?
Yes. Welcome to committee.
Thank you. Thank you. Chair Avercamp and members of the committee, my name is Liesl Crocker, testifying on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project in support of HB 2101 to ban guaranteed income programs in Kansas. Guaranteed income programs are gaining in popularity across the country. These programs are often run by local or city governments and distribute no strings attached cash payments. Recipients can spend the payments on whatever they like, and there are no work or education requirements. Nationwide, there have been more than 150 programs implemented using both taxpayer and private dollars. According to the proponents of these programs, the purpose isn't simply research, it's to build a case for a federal level taxpayer-funded universal basic income program. Such a program would cost trillions of dollars, completely undermine the value of work, and cause economic turmoil. Studies of guaranteed income programs across multiple states have shown what we know from common sense, that guaranteed income is ineffective, reduces work, traps people in government dependency. One recent study showed guaranteed income did not improve recipients' health outcomes, food security, or economic well-being. Those receiving a monthly payment worked less than the control group and spent more time on leisure activities. Participants also did not seek out better jobs or education. At the end of the 3-year program, recipients of guaranteed income had worse personal finances and more debt. According to surveys of participants across 30 pilot programs, only 9% of funds were spent on housing and 2% on healthcare. The largest category of spending was on retail sales, like a purchase from Walmart or Target. In Washington, D.C., participants of a program spent the money on a vacation to Miami, splurges on clothes, and birthday parties. The bottom line is guaranteed income is a bad policy, regardless of who receives a check or what they choose to spend it on. Guaranteed income programs disincentivize work and trap people in government dependency. In California, a series of local pilot programs led to the creation of a new state policy to provide guaranteed income at a cost of $35 million. And that's why 4 states have already taken action to protect their economies and ban these socialist programs before they can take root. State lawmakers in Kansas can do the same by prohibiting local governments from administering these programs. I encourage the committee to support HB 2101 and happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Riley. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question for you. I don't know whether I'm outguessing our ranking person here or not, but what you say that there's, I think you said 150 different programs around the United States. Can you identify some within, right outside of our state borders, Midwest, central part of the United States, programs that are using that?
Sure. So there were programs in Iowa a few years ago. Missouri had a few programs in cities there. Oklahoma has a program. There's been others in southern states like Louisiana, in Mississippi, Florida, Georgia. Those are some of the states.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So can you be more specific of, was it Tulsa, Oklahoma? Tell me cities or tell me a county specifically that was using one of these programs.
Sure. So in Des Moines, Iowa, is an example I can give. So that's the capital of Iowa, and they had a program a few years ago that was distributing income payments. I'm happy to provide a more detailed list of these programs. I'm not sure of the cities in a lot of these states off the top of my head, but usually the larger cities or counties with higher populations were the ones that were interested in running these programs. And some were taxpayer funded and others were funded by private dollars, but distributed using local governments.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you so much for your presentation. So am I to understand that we don't do this anywhere currently in Kansas? Is this a correct statement?
So I personally was not able to find any examples in the state of Kansas. There is a county that recently partnered with local organizations to screen a documentary on the concept of basic income, which organizers said that they would hope would lead to the creation of a local pilot program, but obviously that hasn't happened yet. That's one of the interesting things about these programs, though, is that some of them are in multiple states and have multiple sites and are funded by private dollars. So it's not necessarily something that there's going to be like a local ordinance creating this program. It's more like a private privately funded organization will come into the city and say, hey, do you want some free money for your city, for various people in your city to run this pilot program. So that's why I think this bill is timely right now to sort of prevent this from happening in Kansas before any of these programs can start.
So if I may, a follow-up.
Sure.
So do we have, I mean, is there any example? I mean, I hear what you're saying, but, we weren't specific about the places. We don't have any, I'm trying to get some details, some more specifics about what it is that we should be looking for. Like, do they have a name?
Yes.
Just something more to go on.
Sure. So the programs are typically called guaranteed income pilot programs. And what they do is they distribute a cash payment, usually monthly, but sometimes bi-monthly or something like that, to individuals that sometimes are targeted as low income individuals or low income families specifically. Sometimes they're not targeted. They're just a random sample. And it's a no strings attached cash payment. So instead of being part of like a welfare program where you have work requirements and you have sort of specific eligibility criteria that are in statute, it's just like $1,000 per month on a debit card for recipients to use however they wish. And that they're typically called guaranteed income pilot programs. And again, more than happy to provide a list of all of the 150 examples that have taken place across the country in the last 5 or so years.
Thank you. That would be great. I would appreciate that, that list. And you said some of these were privately funded, so they weren't local or state funded. They were private dollars.
Yes. So there are private organizations that are seeking to create a basis in research for a universal guaranteed income program that would be taxpayer funded at the federal level. There's an organization called Mayors for Guaranteed Income that's made up of mayors across the country, and they're partnering with these private organizations, which are funded by some of like these tech companies out in California, in order to build a research case for the concept of just, a guaranteed basic income that would be not targeted to specific people and not have any sort of work requirements attached to it. That's the stated goal of these programs, is to build a case for a federal level UBI like that was proposed back in 2016 on the presidential campaign trail.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your testimony. Milton Friedman, I think, kind of dabbled in UBI a little bit, tried to figure out how to help the impoverished, and I think he came up with like the negative income tax, but that required some work benefits. Would there be anything that you'd say might be similar that the cities could do that you'd advocate for, that, maybe it's like an earned income tax credit or something along those lines, where you do this, but then get rid of certain social welfare programs to offset it? Or I don't know if that makes any sense or not.
Sure. So that is an argument some people make in favor of guaranteed income programs, that you can eliminate other welfare programs and just give people cash, which would eliminate like administrative overhead of administering these other programs. I think, first of all, the advocates for guaranteed income are proposing this on top of other social safety net programs like TANF or SNAP or any of these things. And then second, I think that, my personal opinion is that the purpose of welfare is to get off it as soon as possible, right? It's to transition people back into work and self-sufficiency. So I think that when you look at other welfare programs, look at food stamps and stuff like that with work requirements in place, the idea is to have it be a time-limited, short-term, way to bridge the gap between work and more work. And I think that the concept of guaranteed income relies on the fact that there are no work requirements attached, that it's guaranteed no matter what. And I think that's the dangerous thing, is that it promotes that welfare without attaching any work or pathway off of assistance and back to self-sufficiency.
Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do have a question for you. I actually had never heard of this guaranteed income program, and knowing now that there are some areas that are doing it, I do see that there's some extremely dangerous ramifications, if I'm understanding this correctly. So what I'm understanding is that you have a population of people that really must work to pay taxes so that that money can support people who do not work at all, for them to use that money in any way, shape, or form that they want to. Is that correct, what I heard you say?
Yeah, so in cases where these guaranteed income programs are government funded or taxpayer funded, that is exactly what happens, is that it's the government collecting money via tax dollars from people who are in the workforce and distributing it to people, some of whom might be working and some of whom might not be working, because there's no requirements to work attached to these programs. And it's money they can spend on whatever they want. One study actually showed that when people received a guaranteed income, their tobacco and alcohol consumption went up. So it's being used on things like that are leisurely or not necessities. It's not being spent on stuff like food and housing. It's being spent just on retail and whatever people feel like buying.
I do have a follow-up question. So where was this born? Is this like a World Economic Forum ideology? Like, where did this come from?
I'm not sure of the exact origins of it. I know that some of the earliest local governments to implement programs were in California. And that sort of is where this Mayors for Guaranteed Income project that is behind a lot of these pilot programs, it was sort of born in California.
Representative Brownlee Page.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me where you got your data from on people using the money to buy alcohol and what have you? Can you tell me where I can look to find that?
Sure, I can send you a link to that study. There was a lot of these programs concluded in the last year, and there was research put out by universities that looked at the health impacts specifically, as well as sort of the categories of spending. So I'm happy to send you that study, and you can look at it.
And then my other question is, how much money? You mentioned 1,000. Is that the minimum? How much money from the places that you know that have it? How much are they giving people? Is 1,000 it, or is it higher than that?
Yeah, a lot of places gave $1,000 a month to participants, and there was other programs that, again, they gave like $500 a week in some cases. Again, I am happy to provide a list of the programs and the specifics of them, but $1,000 per month was one of the more common arrangements.
And do you think a person could live off $1,000 a month? Just asking.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends on where they live and what other types of income that they have, right? If they have some level of work, or if they have food stamps and welfare and housing assistance and various other types of assistance, they might be able to. It really depends on their exact specific situation.
Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Liesl, for being here. I have a couple of questions. First, going back to the commentary on private sector funding, I want to be very clear. Would this legislation prohibit the private sector from engaging in this kind of research with municipalities?
It would prohibit city and local governments from participating in the distribution of guaranteed income, is my understanding of the legislation.
So why did you bring up the private sector?
Because if a private entity funds a guaranteed income program, but then the local government or the city government is the entity that is actually distributing, using their payment systems to distribute the funds, then that is still a participation in the distribution of a guaranteed income program, is what my understanding of the
So if they're
legislation.
receiving $1,000 in cash, you're suggesting that the municipality's role would be to essentially be the middleman in distributing that cash that came from a private investor, and that would be prohibited.
They're providing the information about the people to a private, this private organization that might be running it. They're providing their information. They're helping distribute the funds, and they're supporting the program in that way, yes. And
are you suggesting then that they should not be allowed to utilize, for example, Open Records Acts to get those names?
No, I mean, that would be a publicly available information, so I'm not sure why a private organization would have any trouble using that.
Well, it would be prohibited under what you're discussing. to use public resources? Would it not to
Not-
use public resources to get the names?
No, that's not my understanding, that it would be prohibited for a private individual to look at a publicly available website and get contact information for people.
Well, that's
What
not
I'm
how open
suggesting-
records requests work, but that's okay.
Oh, sure.
I have another question.
Mhm.
So do you have an alternative to this, such as raising the minimum wage? Obviously, this would affect low-income people. Does Opportunity Solutions Project have a position on raising the minimum wage?
No, I think that, when people are in the workforce, they no longer need a guaranteed income to be distributed from their local government.
Well, for the record, my district, here in Kansas, the minimum wage is barely $7. And in my district, one of the most affordable districts, not only in the state of Kansas, but in the United States, most certainly nobody could afford to live on $1,000 per month. I certainly could not. To correct the record, that some people might be able to make that work. Thank you.
Representative Hellwig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'd like to ask the reviser a question, so make sure we're talking about the right stuff here. Is that all right?
And Representative, if you can, just pull that microphone right on up.
Thank you. So, am I understanding this right on the legislation that this doesn't prohibit a guaranteed income program as long as there is a work requirement?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The definition of guaranteed income program would require that it not have any requirement for employment, seeking employment, or attending employment-related training. Additionally, what is prohibited is the city establishing or providing for the operation of a guaranteed income program. So under my interpretation, a private company coming in and operating this program on its own without assistance from the city would not fall within the prohibition of this bill.
I'm just reading it as it requires to have a program, there would have to be a work requirement. If there was no work requirement, then it would be wrong. Thank you.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, question back to the reviser again. So my understanding then, the case of like Catholic Charity, I'm just using an example, that would give out gift cards to folks to help them supplement their purchase and stuff like that, that would not be counted under this bill.
As long as the city's not running it or passing ordinances, then it's fine.
Representative Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't hear this in the testimony, so if I missed it, maybe you could let me know. But in the pilot programs, the programs that you've seen, is there an income limit? So the cities or counties that maybe have adopted an ordinance or resolution, did that just go out to every citizen, that extra cash payment, no matter what their income is, or was there some sort of threshold?
No. So in the programs that I've reviewed, they haven't gone out to every person of any category. They've been like basically a sample, because what they're doing is they're calling it a pilot program. So there's a smaller sample of a population, and in some places it was a more random sample of a larger group of people, and in other cases it is targeted, for example, specifically to people who earn under a certain income limit. But it really differs across the different programs depending on who's running it. So it varies from state to state, but again, I'm happy to provide a list of the programs with more specifics in terms of who's receiving the payment.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I mean, especially if it was a random program and, people from just all walks of life were getting that payment, that'd be interesting to note that. Thank you.
Representative Brownlee Page.
I want to ask this one more time for clarity, because I'm reading it as we would prohibit any municipalities from adopting and implementing the guaranteed income program. That's it. It has nothing to do as to whether they offer work or do work. We're just saying no to this entire program. So I just want to make sure I'm reading it right, because he asked a question. I think he read something different into it. But just looking at it, just literally, we're saying no to anything of this nature.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll clarify. There's a definition in subsection C of guaranteed income program. So the guaranteed income program is prohibited, but in the definition of guaranteed income program, it's a program, it explains what it is, without requiring employment or employment-related training.
Okay, I got that, but he kind of read something a little different, or maybe I didn't hear it clearly, but I just took it literally. We're saying no to this program. Bottom line.
Not quite. So we're saying no to the guaranteed income program, but the definition of guaranteed income program is one without a work requirement.
Okay, that,
Yep. So if it has a work requirement, then it's not considered a guaranteed income program.
okay, so we could have it, but it seems like we would say that a little clear, because it's muddy. It's not clear.
It's statute. So,
Okay, but it's,
so,
okay, thank you.
so Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Liesl, for putting up with all the questions that we have presented to you today. And so, yeah, I've got another. When you compile the information with respect to these programs, could you also let us know which one of those programs, so we could do a comparison by percentage? Like, what are we talking about percentage-wise? Those privately funded programs versus those that are funded by one of the what I'm assuming is a local municipality, and not even the state at this point, because I don't think we. I think we talked about just some local municipalities as opposed to the entire state, but I could be incorrect in that. But if you could provide us with that information, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, happy to.
And committee last question, just because of time, Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And it's not even a question, just outside of the overreach of local control, I'm curious as to what the opponents have to say of this. But I just want to, I have to comment that if some private provider tech company from California comes to House District 24 and wants to give my constituents $500 a week or $1,000 a month, no strings attached, I'm going to have a hard time voting against that. Thank you.
Okay, committee, I think that'll wrap up the proponent section. And Ms. Crocker, if you could, I think this is maybe a add addition to Representative Carr's comment, but maybe a couple examples. I think you have Gary's email. If you want to follow up with those, I think Representative Carr asked for some data on kind of government funded versus private funded. What are you seeing out there percentage wise? But maybe also just some examples of some of these programs would be very helpful. With that, thank you very much for joining us via WebEx. With that, do we have any other proponents for the bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to the neutral portion of the hearing and welcome Jonathan Smith, Executive Director, Lawrence Douglas County Public Health. Jonathan Smith, welcome to committee. Jonathan, are you joining us via WebEx? This might be written only. It appears his testimony will be written only then. Any other? It does. Okay. Anybody else wishing to speak neutrally on the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the neutral portion of the hearing and move on to the opponents. The first opponent is Jay Hall, Deputy Director and General Counsel, Kansas Association of Counties. Mr. Hall, do not see you here. Are you joining us via WebEx? Nope. That one's also written only. And next up, I know he's here. Always good to see you. Spencer Duncan, welcome to committee, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate it. I am Spencer Duncan with the League of Kansas Municipalities, here today on behalf of the cities of Kansas. I'm going to try to cover sort of 3 points and not take up too much time. The first is, let's talk about preemption in general. And I know you're really thinking, Spencer, you're not going to like any preemption. It doesn't matter, right? Well, that's not a true absolute, but of course that's how we lean in the cities. But at the very least, I'd like to think that we have some sort of threshold for why we're going to pass a preemption law when we have these discussions. And I'd also like to think that that threshold includes that somebody somewhere in our state is doing it or even thinking about doing it. And part of why I'm here today is to tell you it's not happening in Kansas. There's no cities that have put it in place. And to my knowledge, and we called around and tried to, there's no cities considering it for a variety of reasons, either because their citizens don't want it, or, to be honest, they can't afford it right now, right? You all understand the issues we're having with local budgets as we talk through taxes. So it's just not an issue in Kansas right now, and I think that should be the first piece of a threshold when we have these discussions. The second part of that is my second point, and that is Article 12, Section 5 of the Kansas Constitution, which gives you a threshold every time you talk about a preemption bill. That is 65 years ago, the voters of this state, we are one of the few states that put it into our Constitution to give you something to consider when you look at preempting local governments. And I put the section in there that says, powers and authority granted cities pursuant to this section shall be liberally construed for the purpose of giving to cities the largest measure of self-government. And it's always, we get it, it's always sort of a gray area when you talk about what elevates itself to that level of staying at local control and the state level. But I would contend that this is absolutely, partly because nobody's doing it yet, but also other issues of if local citizens, along with their elected officials, who at some point, just as much as we trust you up here to do your job, we ask for a little trust back in local governments that they'll make the right decisions for their communities. My third point is, we are concerned with some of the language in this bill. It does try to define what these programs are, but I want to give you a few examples of where we have some concerns. So for instance, we have cities that get dollars from HUD. Those HUD dollars are going to things like child care programs right now. In some of those cases, the federal government defines those as cash assistance when those dollars go to the cities. That we call them vouchers a lot locally because we say we're giving out vouchers, but the actual definition of some of those in the federal is that it's a cash assistance that HUD is passing down. I don't know if this impacts that or not, but based on the fact that this says cash programs, I'm concerned about what that looks like. We also have cities, whether they're trying to deal currently with their unsheltered programs or their child care programs, who are trying to group together the resources of their private nonprofits, whether it's churches, whether it's other entities, and they've become the hub. So all these organizations meet on a regular basis together, and the city has become sort of the funnel to make sure that there's not duplication of services, and they're an active participant in helping those resources get out to the citizens. I don't know, but I'm concerned that could also impact these programs under the way this is defined. So while we don't like this bill at all and think it could just stop where it is, if you really are going to move forward with it, we would really like to have a discussion about some clarifying language to ensure that those programs don't become the unintended consequences of the language in this bill, because we certainly don't want to impact any of those programs that are in existence right now. So those are my 3 points, and I'm always open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Committee Representative Brownlee-Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir, for saying that, because we need some clarity. We can't do it, the government by itself. And when we have charities who are willing to help us, then we need to make sure that we leave that open so that we can work together, because we can't do it by ourselves, and they can't do it by themselves. So thank you for the clarity.
I think what cities have found, which has been important, is we don't have the resources, and there's other really great community groups doing it, but we also don't want them to duplicate services, and they don't want to duplicate services. And so coming together, communities are figuring out, working as one unit has made a big difference to make sure that people can get the help they need and that we're not all wasting money, whether it's private or public dollars.
Thank you.
Representative Humphreys.
Thank you. I do have a question. So the vouchers you're talking about for other programs, those do have income requirements?
Well, some do. Some, you're talking about like if I get, for instance, we'll just use as an example, we can pretend it's
Yeah.
partially real and I half know what I'm talking about. But I mean, so if HUD is giving us dollars that are supposed to go to a child care program, and then those dollars are given to the individual who then goes and gives them to the daycare center, right? Some of those may actually be defined as cash programs from the federal government, even though we may locally call them a voucher.
Yeah.
So if someone, yeah, sorry.
But it's for low-income citizens. I mean, I'm reading your
But those programs,
care vouchers and housing programs for low-income citizens.
those programs do not have, for instance, the HUD dollars we get do not come with a requirement that you have to be doing the things outlined in this. You don't have to have a job because maybe there's a disability component involved.
But is there a threshold for low income, like an income someone would have?
Oh, there's a poverty. Oh, I see what you're at. Yeah, there's a poverty amount. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. But
Okay.
yes,
Okay,
sorry.
so it seems like because of that, then this is something a little bit different. But let's say this doesn't affect those, just out of curiosity. When you say even if one city is considering the legislature should not punish all 625, how is it punishing them?
Well, because we have constitutional home rule, and the purpose of that was to say we understand that all 625 cities in Kansas are not going to look the same, right? So personally, I'm on the Topeka City Council. I'm never going to vote for the bag ban that Lawrence did, right? But Lawrence has it in place, and there were preemption efforts to preempt that. Now, my point is the other 624 cities may not agree with that, but under our system, Lawrence should be afforded to make those kinds of decisions.
Yeah, I understand, but it doesn't seem like that's punishing 624 other cities.
Well, a preemption bill is
They're not
saying
wanting
we
to do
didn't
it
like
anyway.
what one city did, therefore we're going to pass a state law saying no city can do it, which takes away their ability in the future to even consider any similar policy. So that is absolutely a punishment to those cities to say, we're taking away your right to ever consider any similar policy.
Which I think is the point of the bill.
It's to punish, well,
No, not to punish at all.
Yeah.
But
to punish cities for something we haven't
there's not a
done.
guaranteed income disbursement. I think that's what the point was.
And that may be. I just will revert back to whether we all think in this room that's a good idea or not. We also, again, live in a state that has a constitutional home rule that tells us to weigh that heavily when we consider preemption.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks.
Personal clarification, I think I carried the ban on plastic bags and straws, and
You know,
intention wasn't to punish
I win
cities.
some, we lose some,
You know,
it's
The
fine.
intention was to protect
We understand.
kind of personal and business.
It's all about which chair you're in, right?
Yeah, for sure. Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your testimony. Do cities need an ordinance or resolution to disperse HUD funds?
You know, yeah, that's a great question. Maybe because they may have to design the policy. I don't know. I'll find out the answer to that. I should know that. I'm on the city council. And we have ordinances. In Topeka, we have ordinances that dictate how we do that. But I don't know if that's a requirement. So I went, yeah. I know most cities have passed something to determine how they're distributed, but yes.
And then typically from an accounting perspective, like that money's going to be in a different bucket than if they would establish probably a cash-only type.
Yeah, my concern is, let's say, and I know this is the wild card, right? But these are the things that we worry about. You get someone who says, I don't like that we're spending money on whatever this program is. So they challenge you in court and say, well, that's technically defined as a cash program. And the courts look at this language and say, without a clarifying language, yep, it's a cash program. And this says technically that falls under this new definition, right? That's what we worry about, is the outlier.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, quick clarification on the HUD programs. So for a HUD program, that funding, so can you talk about what's the intended purpose, and are there restrictions on what that money can be used for?
There are. I mean, because you apply for every HUD program. So, for instance, cities will apply specifically for housing, childcare, whatever is eligible for. So once you've made that bucket, so let's say you've gotten money from HUD in the housing bucket, they absolutely have requirements. This person has to meet this threshold. It has to be this kind of housing. Your city has to account for every dollar. So those rules are all in place. None of those, though, however, have work requirements or job interview requirements or any of those types of requirements.
Okay, but the funds dispersed to the individual have a specific purpose for which they can be spent, correct?
Correct.
Okay. In the bill, and this might be a question for the reviser, can you go over the definition again, specifically on the use of funds?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the definition of guaranteed income program, it must be a program where the cash payment can be used for any purpose.
So if the HUD specific funds can be used, they're very restricted on what those funds can be used for. I think if I'm understanding the bill correctly, that example does not apply because the bill is more for the concept of a guaranteed income. Income can be spent for anything. And so it would be more broad-based than a specific program intended for childcare or.
Sure. I think the fact that we're all unclear is probably why it'd be really great to have a clarifying sentence or two that indicates this is does not include whatever those are program, you know. And I haven't thought that language all the way through. I'm happy to talk to our lawyers over it and see if we could come up with something. But I mean, I think that's why it'd be really nice to have that clarifier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So how then, and maybe I don't know enough about like the stimulus check program, how would that affect, because I don't believe there's a work requirement to receive the stimulus check, and you can certainly spend that on anything you choose to spend it on. So would that mean that Kansas would then opt out of the federal stimulus program?
I don't know that I can answer that. If you ask me to explain the federal government ever, regardless of who they're, I don't know. But no, I don't know the answer to that. I think the federal, we obviously don't have any authority over federal funds.
Yes, the revisers to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It wouldn't apply for a couple reasons. First, the stimulus payments were federal government. City, counties didn't have to do anything. And second, they're not periodic cash payments. It was one time or two times, and so it would not meet the definition.
Thank you. So if you don't mind a follow-up. So you use the term periodic. So in fact, these would have to be periodic payments, or you said one or two times. So if that was done once or twice, is that in? I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that when I looked at the bill. Is there a number of times that makes it that this bill would make it a violation, or is it any time? It is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The word periodic is not defined in the bill, and so we would go to just its ordinary usage, which would be occurring or recurring at regular intervals. So it would have to be more than once. I don't know if twice. If we're thinking to the stimulus payments, it wasn't you get one this year, you get one next year. They just kind of happened. So it wasn't regular or expected payments.
Okay, so as long as it's irregular, then apparently it wouldn't be. Yeah, okay. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Roser.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't really know that I have a question. It might just be a clarification. So the Oklahoma instance that was referenced in the proponent testimony, I'm pretty positive that had to do with Sulphur, Oklahoma, which was hit with the EF3 tornado several times in the night, and their city was wiped. I'm pretty sure, and I'm looking right now, right for it, I think they did a guaranteed income program for 6 months, which was technically disaster relief, but it was periodic, and there weren't any income requirements for that. I guess I don't really know if it's a question for Jenna or for the revisor's office, if there's a way that we would to clarify House Bill 2101 for exemptions on guaranteed income programs, because to me I wouldn't want to stop a county from being able to enforce something like that temporarily temporarily for an instance, just like what happened in Westmoreland last April.
I'd have to look into the details of that specific program and how it was administered to see if it fits in that definition or not.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Mr.
appreciate
Duncan, for your testimony. I think the third opponent, Dustin Hare, is also written only. Are there any other opponents to speak to the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the opponent portion of the hearing. And I just have one follow-up. When Jenna was giving a description of the bill, there's a question about other parts of statute which might restrict cities in a similar way. I think she did a little research on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it turns out there's a wealth of statutes banning cities from doing all sorts of things. Just a couple of the more recent ones I found. These are all in Chapter 12, Article 16. The first one is 16-124, which relates to, it's a prohibition on cities implementing anything related to fees, ownership, storage, licenses, et cetera, for firearms and ammunition. KSA 12-16-134 has the same prohibitions on regulation of knives. KSA 12-16-219 prohibits requiring installation of multi-purpose residential fire protection systems. KSA 12-16-221 prohibits cities from restricting or regulating the use or sale of motor vehicles based on the energy source that propels them. And KSA 12-16-141 prohibits or it does not allow a city to limit or restrict the enforcement of federal immigration laws.
Okay, thank you very much for those clarifications. Any further comments on the bill? Seeing Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I ask a question, one final question of our proponent? Is she still available?
Yeah, we can open up that portion of the hearing. And Ms. Crocker, are you still available via WebEx?
Yes, hi.
Thank you. Prompted actually by Representative Roser's question and also some commentary from our revisors, did Opportunity Solutions Project have a position on President Trump's stimulus checks?
I'm not aware of any such position.
I would like to make the point that those were also essentially direct cash payments that had few, if any, restrictions on what people could use them for from the government to private citizens.
It's a good example, a good point. Any further comments? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2101. And let's wrap that up real quick. Next up, committee, we will open up discussion and discussion amendments on House Bill 2015. And to begin that, I'll ask the revisor's office to give a quick review of House Bill 2015.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for speaking slow enough where I could pull it up on my computer, the bill brief. House Bill 2015 would direct the Secretary for Children and Families to request a waiver from SNAP, so Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program rules, to prohibit the purchase of candy and soft drinks with food assistance.
Committee, any questions for the revisor on the bill? Seeing none, committee, any discussion or amendments on House Bill 2015? And I'll offer a technical amendment to House Bill 2015, and we'll wait a moment while it gets passed out. So I'll ask the amendment is a technical amendment, and I'll ask Jenna to explain that, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amends just a correction of a statute reference. Last year, there were two versions of, or two bills that amended KSA 793602, and because of that, it created a conflict. We cured that conflict, so now we can just go back to referencing the statute 793602. So we cured the conflict, so now that other section no longer exists, and this just corrects that.
Committee, I'll ask for a second on the amendment, and I'll have a second from Representative Riley. And open up, happy to stand for questions on the amendment. Seeing no questions on the amendment, I'll move my amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment passes. Committee, any discussion on the bill or amendments? Representative Owsley.
So, Mr. Chair, the intent of this bill is to promote healthy dietary habits. If I understood the hearing correctly, and I was to understand there was a federal movement coming, Make America Healthy Again, if I heard the conferee correct. And we want to promote this everywhere for as many folks as we can, because we know healthy diets equal healthy outcomes, less burden on the entire society, right? I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and I have an amendment. So, Mr. Chair, when the revisor's done in passing out the amendment, I might ask for an explanation from the revisor's office, just for clarity's sake for the committee members.
We ready? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This proposed amendment would pull in Section KSA 46137 and add a new subsection to that statute that would require the LCC to develop a process for disbursement of reimbursements for legislator per diem amounts, and it would prohibit reimbursements for monies that are spent on the same items prohibited by purchase with monies granted under KSA 39709. So legislative per diem payments could not be reimbursed for the same things prohibited for the SNAP benefits, alcohol, cigarettes, soda, candy is prohibited in the bill.
Mr. Chair, clarifying question for the revisor. So this would prohibit tobacco, alcohol, sugary beverages, candy bars, steak, lobster, cruises, all from being spent on our taxpayer-provided per diem?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, I don't know if it would prohibit the purchase of steaks bought at a store, but if they are bought hot at a restaurant, I think it would.
Okay. Thank you for the clarifying question.
And any questions? We don't have a second, but I think it's okay to, if there's any questions on the amendment for the revisers at this point. Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just again, a question on the second page of this amendment. It's using the section 46-137A. I thought that area was all struck out with our new pay and everything like that. That looks like old statute.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I'm looking in the current statutes, it's here, so I'm not aware of any legislation that repealed the statute.
So we have Representative Humphreys' question for the reviser.
Okay, I am still interested in the question, that answer, but, so just, does the amendment now only apply to the per diem payments to legislators, or does it still include all the other stuff that was in the bill to begin with? Because I just noticed that concerning public assistance got struck out in the title. So now, is it only legislators, or is it legislators in addition to all the other public assistance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that amendment to the title is necessitated by a provision in the Constitution calling for a single subject of bills. And so because adding in this other section will make it not only public assistance, but also adds in legislator per diems, the single subject that encompasses both of those things would be state monies. And so that is just a rewording of the title to fit both of the topics covered. The bill as introduced would not be affected. All of that would still be in there, plus this other statute.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So I think we're not really discussing the amendment necessarily. We're discussing any clarifications from the reviser on the amendment, which I think is okay before we ask for a second. So if it's specific to the amendment, because in order to second, I think somebody might have a clarification request from the reviser. Any further clarification from the reviser? Representative Burkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This would only be per diem for legislators and no per diem for any other state employee, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative, it does not specify just legislators, but it would be whoever the Legislative Coordinating Council develops the process for, so it might include people like me.
Another question for the revisers. Clarification, Representative Barth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is this an appropriate time to challenge germaneness?
So I think with the committee process that we have in the Kansas Legislature, germaneness is kind of determined by the chair, which I believe I can rule an amendment not germane, and certainly the committee can overrule the chair on that. But I believe that's the process. And is that correct, Jenna?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The rule of germaneness is one that is adopted in the House rules, and so it is your rules, but in the committees, the chair is given wide latitude to govern the meeting as he or she sees fit, so the chair could make a decision on that if he wished.
Seeing no further questions from the reviser, ask if there's a second on the amendment.
Second.
A second by, I believe, Representative Carr. Committee, any discussion on the amendment? Representative Esau.
Could I ask if the representative proposing this amendment, do we have any idea what the fiscal note might be to manage this?
Mr. Chair, thank you. I did not have time to inquire with the fiscal impact of this, but I think it could be conducted within the Legislative Coordinating Council's business of the day.
Representative Simmons.
I fully support this amendment because I also support making America healthy again. And I think that we serve the people. We should abide by the same rules we expect them to live by. If we're going to be punching down on people, and you don't want to be accused of that, I think this is an easy solution.
Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too agree with that because, again, we say we want to make America healthy. And I know I've been working on that. I lost 30 pounds. I'm trying to eat healthier, but it's not a poor man's venture because things are expensive. So if we want them to, then we need to model the same thing. Thank you.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support this amendment as well. I think I heard my colleagues mention the fact that with relationship to the bill that it may not be an answer-all, end-all, but it is a step in the right direction. And so I would look at this as certainly being a step in the right direction.
Thank you. And real quick, to address the idea of germaneness, it's the way I would approach it, and I would hope to be consistent throughout my time in the legislature. Committees tend to be a little bit more broad with what's germane, what's not, much more broad than what's allowed on the House floor. And so on the House floor, I believe this is nowhere close to being germane, but for the sake of the committee discussion and some flexibility that sometimes is needed in committee, certainly open to having the discussion on this. But
I can appreciate that. Thanks.
Representative Humphreys.
So with respect, Mr. Chairman, did you rule that it was germane? I mean, it did seem like it was challenged. And I'll just say we did add that into the House rules this year, that the committee chairman, one of the duties is to rule on germaneness. I mean, it was always kind of assumed, but then we actually put it in this session in our House rules. So did you rule?
So for the sake of discussion and for the sake of consistency, because even in the past couple of years, we've seen the need to make large changes to bills that were in our committee. And so when working the bills, we sometimes do stretch the germaneness topic in committee beyond what is normally allowed on the House floor. And so, yes, this is a stretch, but to remain consistent.
And I agree with you. But I just didn't hear you say that for sure, but I'm in complete agreement.
Germane,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that clarification.
I guess I would just comment, Mr. Chair, and also to the representative that just commented as well. My reason for challenging germaneness or bringing it up in the first place is just, we're looking at apples and oranges here a little bit. We're looking at public assistance versus legislative pay. We're looking at W-2 employee benefit and pay, versus a SNAP public assistance program, completely opposite things. That's it. Thank you.
I would agree with that. And I think sometimes I've brought amendments in committees as well that may or may not have been germane, but it's often done to make a point, even though the amendments frequently fail. Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would argue that state funds are state funds. And in light of the Make America Healthy Again movement, I certainly wouldn't see how this would be outside of taxpayer dollars or taxpayer dollars. If you threw them all on the table, you couldn't pick one from the other. Taxpayer dollars are taxpayer dollars, and if we're going to hold those taxpayer dollars accountable in one area, then those taxpayer dollars should be accountable across the board. We owe that to those people who voted for us and brought us here. They didn't vote for us to be in these positions so that we could misuse things only in our benefit. We are here to be a representation of those people that brought us here. And if you have those people in your district and those people use SNAP benefits, then you represent those as well. So I would say that this is very germane. Thank you.
That's a good point. And certainly one of the things to keep in mind with taxpayer dollars is the intent and the spirit of the program. And I think the intent and the spirit behind the SNAP is right in the name, Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. And the intent behind per diem is different than the intent behind the SNAP program. So, Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would argue that an alcoholic beverage would be, I don't know how you work that in to something that sounds reasonable. I mean, this is an alcoholic beverage. It doesn't provide any sort of sustenance. It doesn't provide any sort of nutrition. It creates the possibility for further problems, not just medical, but psychological and mental as well. So, again, I'll disagree. I don't see how you can make that those distinctions. Thank you.
Committee, any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Pickard.
I'd just like to point out that the SNAP program is run through the USDA. It's not a state program, and they have the say over this. And what the bill actually does is it would, if it passes, the Secretary of DCF, yes, will have to petition the USDA for them to consider a waiver. So, I mean, and they have not granted waivers, generally speaking, having to do with the SNAP benefits. So, anyway, we're kind of getting way off. So I just thought I'd make that comment.
Representative Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's about time. I'm going to call for the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there was a motion to call the question, and I believe in the rules that would be a superseding motion. So, and it's not subject to discussion.
It's not subject to a second or discussion, but it does require a vote.
I think it requires it. I think motions require seconds. I would have to double check the rules, but. Thank you, Mr. I just conferred with a colleague. It will require a second.
We have a second from Representative Hellwig. So committee, all those in favor of calling the question, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
No.
The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So clarification, do I still get to close?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you would still be allowed to close, and that motion would require 2/3 to pass. So that was the chair's judgment that it had received that many votes.
Representative Owsley, you may close.
See that the question has been called. I appreciate the committee's entertainment and discussion here. I truly appreciate the chair's germane ruling. It's not often that a Democratic amendment gets ruled germane in this building. So I truly appreciate that. I would go on to say that I agree with the statements that were made. Taxpayer dollars is taxpayer dollars. We say that all the time when we talk about Medicaid expansion. Though you know, this building is confusing sometimes. And this does not include legislative pay. This is only per diem, so that is required for our, food and shelter. And we had the discussion in the hearing here upon, healthy diets and the benefits thereof, and I can't think of anybody that should be more clear-headed and healthy-minded than leaders. We're here making decisions. We've all heard of the freshman 15. I was having some sidebar conversations, and I actually lost 15 pounds my first year here. I've since found them all, plus a few extras. But we know it's a real thing. I've got my Kit Kat here that I grabbed out of a basket full of candy in the hallway earlier. I wanted to take this amendment as far as to make it applicable to lobbyist contributions to lawmakers as well. I did not take the time or find the time to do that. Federal program. TANF is a federal program also, and we have restrictions upon that at the state level as we are the administrators of that program. And I understand, and actually I owe the committee apology. That shouldn't be part of my closing. But this also applies to the TANF restrictions that Kansas has put on recipients of that. So I think if we're going to sit here from this committee table and tell people what's good for them and that we know what's best for them, that perhaps we ought to take a spoonful of our own medicine. And Mr. Chair, I'd close on my motion.
Motion and a second. So all those in favor of the Owsley motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. Representative Simmons asked for her vote on the Owsley amendment to be recorded as an aye. Is that correct? So committee, we're back.
Representative Carr, same request.
Representative Carr asked his aye vote to be recorded on the Owsley amendment.
And I'd like to have that recorded too, Mr. Chair.
As well as Representative Brownlee Page as an aye. Is that correct? Okay. We're back on the bill. Committee, any further discussion, amendments on the bill? Representative Owsley.
Discussion on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, thank you for your indulgence, committee. I don't think it's right for us to sit here and do this. We know through our hearings that a individual could not purchase a Gatorade Zero for their kid participating in whatever sport may be, suffering from a leg cramp. We know that they couldn't get a candy apple. We know this is going to hurt small businesses across the state of Kansas. In my biased opinion, I think it's just poor shaming, and shame on us for that. Outside of the discussion we just had, I've got very little good to say about this bill, and I'll be voting no on the passage of House Bill 2015.
Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too will be voting no, because I think it's messy. Because it seems like we should go I don't know why they didn't go after the people. Pepsi, Coca-Cola, and all these other companies, they're making it. We all have a choice to decide whether we want to partake of it or what have you. But all they're going to do, the little people, is just switch. If all we got to do is add flour to the stuff, then flour it on. Because we're going to make it where we can still sell it and make some money. So I just think it's just crazy. Doesn't make sense.
Representative Carr.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as much as I can appreciate the intent and the lean towards health, I've certainly had times in my life where I was exceptionally healthy, and then I came to the legislature. But aside from that, we have to look at what this is really doing to families. If we provided enough in SNAP benefits and we told those families that they had to purchase 100% fruit juice, I don't think any one of those families would not purchase fruit juice. The reason that you purchase those sugary, sweet drinks is because you're trying to feed your family for more than just a day. You're trying to feed that family clear to the end of the week. And you've got a choice. You can buy one bottle of real fruit juice, or you can buy 4 bottles of something that's a little more sugary, but it doesn't have them starving or doing without until the end of the week. And I think we do ourselves an injustice because we're the ones that sit in control of this, and it makes it look as though we simply don't care about the people that we're supposed to serve. And because of those reasons, I'll be voting no on this bill as well. Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me. To contribute to my colleagues, I would add that I'll be voting no because I think it's yet another example of the state government trying to tell people what to do with their bodies, whether it's what to put in your body, how to treat it, what you can say about it, how you can speak about it. And I think it's an overreach. I think it's another example of the government trying to micromanage people's personal lives and their families. So I'll be voting no.
Committee, any further discussion? Amendments on House Bill 2015. Representative Owsley.
Mr. Chair, I have another amendment. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, committee, is there a motion on House Bill 2015? Representative Humphries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee that the committee would report House Bill 2115 favorably for passage as amended.
2015, correct?
Yes, 2015.
As amended, correct? We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second by Representative Bergkamp. Any further discussion, committee? Yes. Representative Humphries.
Well, I could close when I do this, but I just want to say, I didn't buy pop or juice. Or if we bought juice when our kids were growing up, they got this much juice in a glass of water. So I don't feel like I'm depriving someone of something. I feel strongly. We didn't buy candy. We went out to dinner. We drank water. And being healthy and making healthy choices is just part of being, it's just the right thing to do, I feel like. And so therefore, I'm not depriving, I don't feel like I'm depriving someone of nutritious food because that's what this program is about. It's about nutrition. And I raise my children that way. And so I feel completely comfortable asking other people with taxpayer dollars to be wise in what they choose to. And I guess there's more discussion I should have closed, but.
Further discussion on the bill, committee? Representative Brownlee Page.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's okay if you can afford that. And I understand we don't want anybody to abuse the system. No, some people can't afford. If you're only getting a limited amount, you can't do all the things you're saying. Maybe you had a mother, you had your father, you got your husband, yourself. You can afford all that. Some people, it's just them by themselves. They're trying to make it. I believe they want to do the right thing, but it's hard. When you say you want to be healthy, fruit is high, everything is high, that you're only getting a certain amount, and you got to make it work. And if you don't have it, you don't have it. That's not something they want to do. They have to, because they're trying to live. So, I've seen my kids I taught, they struggle, because some of the teachers would look how they're running to their food. They might not have food at home. The only food they got was what they had at school. And then their parents are struggling trying to put it together. So I hear what you're saying. That's a good thing if you got it. But even with what we offer, it's still not a lot. If that's all you had, because I don't see how they make it off that. But people struggle and they do. And I respect you, and we all have a choice, we have a right, but this is just a little too much. But then the same people will vote against if they need some medical assistance. And maybe I did try, but it's hereditary. No matter what I ate, if my father was 15 of them, they were diabetics, most of them. And most of them tried to eat healthy, but it was just their DNA, their makeup. So there's a lot of other issues that affect things. But I respect everybody's opinion, but I wish we would we're hard on the little people. I wish we would get on the corporate, and what about corporate welfare? That's a whole nother topic, but I'll stop because that's not germane to the topic.
President Brownlee Page, I think I would agree with you on everything you said, but maybe with a different outcome. So, any further discussion, committee? Seeing none, Representative Humphries, you may close.
Close.
Committee, we have a motion and a second on House Bill 2115. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. We have a request from Representative Simmons to have her no vote recorded. Committee, so the bill is passed out of committee as amended. Representative Simmons asked for her no vote to be recorded. Any further?
Representative Carr, same request.
Representative Carr asks his no vote. Representative Paley.
Thank you.
Brownlee Page, your no vote, correct? Okay, thought I heard that correctly. Okay, so committee, the bill is passed out. Thank you very much. That concludes the agenda of the day, although I'm going to open up for comments from the committee. Representative Roser.
Gary, could you record my vote as well? Can you, please? In opposition. Can I give a statement? Sure. I just wanted it, since I've got people locally who are watching right now, given the opponent testimony that was given on February 4th, I've chose to vote no, just because I trust the judgment and the professionalism of those who gave the opponent testimony, and felt compelled by their testimony to vote no, as well as the remarks given to me by constituents in District 67.
Very good. Any further comments from the committee? Committee, we have another meeting next Tuesday. We'll have a couple bill hearings, and then next Thursday, we'll save that meeting to work bills. So thank you very much. Thanks for your patience today. We are